Definitely. So I think the biggest thing from my perspective is I've always said that there's three different types of pricing. There's the data-driven approach, which is literally whatever the price per square foot is, that's what we're going to list it for. That's much more for investment properties, kind of duplexes, triplexes, things like that.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another Workout Wednesday. Thank you for watching last week's video. Hope you enjoyed Jessica. It was a pleasure to have her come on. For this week, we have another special guest out of our San Marco office, Duncan Foster. Welcome.
How's it going?
Hey, great to have you on. We'll go straight into the questions. I asked this for pretty much everybody. We've worked a lot back and forth, so I do know a lot about you. But just for the people that are watching and may not have seen you before, anybody outside of our company that's not watching, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I got into real estate basically pretty much right out of college. Graduated in 2020 with COVID, which was the most inopportune time to graduate. So didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. Always kind of had a thought like maybe I'll get into real estate, maybe not, maybe I'll do it on the side, that kind of thing. Then opportunity presented itself and I was like, you know what? I might as well. Like nowhere else is really giving people an opportunity that have no experience. Yeah. Got straight into it and never looked back. Been doing it for coming up on right on 5 years now. Yeah. So been loving it ever since.
Very nice. And you've always been with Berkshire?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. For today's topic, we're covering comparative market analysis. Walk me through the process of how you do your comparative market analysis. What key points are you looking for to include in one whenever you're meeting with a client?
Definitely, yeah. So basically, I'm taking everything in the neighborhood that's sold, whether it's very, very much bigger, very, very much smaller, whatever the case may be, taking it and at least telling them what's sold, what's on the market, what's under contract within the last, I try to do 4 months just to get a little bit narrower of it from the wide angle view. And then specifically for pricing, specifically for market analysis for their specific property, it's everything that's sold within 6 months. If it's under contract, I'll still include it. If it's active, I like to show it to them, but don't let it influence that much into pricing because anyone can list a house for whatever they want to. It's a difference in getting it sold.
Yes, absolutely.
So pretty much, and within that, the key features that I'm trying to narrow down are the square footage, first and foremost. Usable square footage, not just a non-ducted sunroom or a screened-in back porch, things like that. The neighborhood itself, because appraisers usually take a mile radius around the home, but it could be completely different neighborhoods, could be within an HOA, not in an HOA, that kind of thing. So try to make it specific to that home, and then any updates that they've done compared to everything else that's sold in the area, and anything outside that they've done to the home. Like entire new patio, living space outside, or entertaining space, I should say, outside, that kind of thing. That's kind of the key features because that's what grabs people's attention the most.
So are 6 months, is it like the typical amount of time that everybody's going to be using, or is it something that you base off of?
6 months from the appraisal standpoint, because I try to set people up for success on the front end with their appraisal if we were to get a non-cash offer on a property. That's what an appraiser is going to look at. So I try to price it well to where when we get to the appraisal, we're not going to have issues with it. And so that we're fairly priced on the market too.
Absolutely. What are some differences that you've seen preparing a CMA in today's market, where days on market's a little bit longer compared to a few years ago where you're going to be getting multiple offers, probably not going to be listed very quick at all. How has that changed in the past few years when you're preparing a CMA?
Definitely. So I think the biggest thing from my perspective is I've always said that there's three different types of pricing. There's the data-driven approach, which is literally whatever the price per square foot is, that's what we're going to list it for. That's much more for investment properties, kind of duplexes, triplexes, things like that, in addition to cap rate and other things. That's very much like cut and dry. You have an investor, that's what they're going to want to list it for. Very, very niche usability with that. There's the less is more approach, where we take a full CMA and then we go a little bit below that to try to drive interest, to try to get it into like a bridge gap pricing. or a bridge pricing, I should say, to where, someone's approved for $350. Well, the home's value is really $360, but we want to be able to capture those people when they're looking on Zillow, set their search parameters for $350 or less. You want to be able to show up on those. Yeah. That's the strategy that I'm seeing the most now. Yeah. And then the third strategy is retail, which is where we're seeing what the home is listable for, what it's basically worth from the CMA standpoint, and we go a little bit above that. And we say, okay, if we need to come down, we can. We try not to go too far over, like 30, 40, 50 grand over, things like that, depending on the price point. We try not to go too far over that to be still realistic, but still be negotiable to come down to get the most, or what the seller feels like is the most for their property. That's what we saw more in 2020 to 2022. And now 23 to now is much more of the less is more strategy, which works.
I like that a lot. What platform are you using whenever you're preparing these CMAs?
So I typically do the full CMA just through the MLS. Okay. I'll take whatever properties it is that I'm using. I'll just do a quick CMA on them just to get price per square footage, see what the average bed bath count is, things like that, and then use that to drive the full CMA in the MLS. Okay. And then if I have someone, I kind of present it 3 different ways though. If I have someone that's very much, they want graphs, they want pictures, they're not so bogged down in the numbers of it, but they want it presentable, they want it to look good, feel good. I'll use KV Core and use Core Present. Okay. People seem to love that when it's that kind of seller. Sometimes you have a seller where, they're just worried about the numbers, they just want to see what the other homes were, what they're worth, what their home's worth, and they're cut and dry. I literally just print out the MLS CMA and include that. Yeah. And then if it's someone where it's like, okay, I'm not ready yet, but I want to know what we're on now, or what we're worth now, I should say. Let's kind of revisit this later on down the road. I'll set them up in Real Scout on their property evaluation that way after I do a CMA, and I say, hey, this is what I'm coming back with, but in case I don't talk to you again for, a couple more weeks and you get ready, this is just going to keep your interest involved. And they usually appreciate that. Yeah.
I like that a lot. Are you able to figure out pretty quick how a seller might prefer the CMA? Like if they're more visual or if they're more data driven, have you be able to find that out pretty quick?
Pretty much. Okay. Within, unless it's, a referral from a friend who I sold the house to or something like that, and it's their neighbor and they call me directly and they're like, hey, come over and let's talk about it. Then it's a little bit more difficult. Then I bring kind of both and feel it out within the conversation. But if it's someone, they're very much straightforward, right to the point, MLS all day. Yeah. If they're very much more like, hey, let's talk about family, let's talk about all the memories we have in the home, let's talk about, everything outside of just the bones of the house, that's when I bring in the KV Core.
Very nice. Have you encountered a situation where a client disagrees with your CMA, and how did you handle it?
I think every realtor has, for sure. I essentially, if it's some drastic number off, we're talking like, for example, a $350,000 home, they're talking about somewhere in the fours, something like that. If it's way too egregiously high price and I just feel like it's going to sit for months and months or however long, I just tell them, hey, I might not be the realtor for you at that point, because I don't want my name associated with a listing that's going to be sitting for 8, 9, 10 months or longer. Okay. And then their home value is only going to be driven down. If it's, $25,000 off on a $350,000 home, they want to go $375,000. I'll usually, be understanding of them that they want to get the most out of their money, or out of their most money out of their home, I should say. Yeah. But kind of have a conversation on the front end that says, let's go ahead and build in a price reduction strategy. If we've got absolutely no showings for 2 weeks straight or 1 week straight, however long their timeline is at the end of the day to get the home sold, we're going to talk about a price reduction at least X amount every however many weeks until we get to that point where we're starting to get more traction, we're starting to get more people coming in. And, that also holds me accountable to still have open houses, to still market the property, things like that. So I can say, hey, I'm doing all the things on my end. I think it's a pricing issue. Okay. That's kind of how we open that door to begin with.
Yes, I like that you have it built in to rule out anything else that you do think it can be narrowed down to. I think it's pricing. I like that you have that built in. Definitely. What do you say is the main difference between a CMA and appraisal?
Main difference that I found is all appraisals are kind of subjective.
Okay.
Excuse me. Most all appraisers are not going to appraise a home the exact same value.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a little bit of variance here and there, unless it's a new construction home in St. Johns County, Nassau County, wherever. Those are the most cut and dry, honestly. But everything else, it's incredibly subjective. Mm-hmm. So what I value in internal upgrade or interior upgrades, I should say, what I place the value on that is not going to be the same as what an appraiser is going to appraise. Is what the appraiser is going to put the value on that as. Mm-hmm. What I value a second car garage in a neighborhood that's mainly one car garages is not going to be the same that the appraiser does. And then also appraisers keep in mind any concessions that the seller gives to the buyer, and they subtract that from the purchase price as well, which I've always thought that's kind of interesting because that could go very many different ways with the concessions. Mm-hmm. But it's something to keep in mind too. So when I'm seeing that more and more when I'm building the CMA, I always keep the tab open in the MLS to show any concessions that are given so I can tell sellers on the front end, hey, they're selling for, again, for the 350 for example. They're selling for 350 in this neighborhood, but you're also giving up 10,000 in concessions on average, or 5,000, or whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. So they're at least prepared to give those concessions, and we kind of either build that into the price, or not even try to build it into the price and lower the price to offset that cost.
Awesome. A lot of people now, I think you touched on it a little bit before, a lot of people now are doing their research before meeting with a realtor. Going on Zillow, looking at certain properties, and then going to maybe a meeting with you, and they say, we already have some properties that we've looked at. Mm-hmm. How has that changed how you're preparing a CMA?
Not much, honestly. I like to present all the facts. I like to tell them everything that's going on in their neighborhood, whether they know it or they don't know it. Mm-hmm. I might not go as in depth and say, hey, the home across the street sold for this much. I might just say, you know what's going on in your neighborhood. I know you're informed. I know you know everything, but as due diligence for you, so that you're going, when you're interviewing realtors, I want you to know that I did my research too. Yes. These are all the homes that I found in your neighborhood, and I always say, did I miss anything? Just because it shows that I'm wanting to be, communicative with them throughout the whole process. Yeah. So, and that usually, from what I found, kind of goes a long way, honestly, with them from the communication standpoint, and they appreciate that. But no, it doesn't really change much of how I kind of complete the CMA.
You talked a little bit earlier, whenever you have a home that has unique features, whole back patio, maybe a pool, landscaping, new sod, anything that would come into play, how are you adjusting the CMA with that property?
So if it's like completely redone, renovated, interior, I try to figure out about how much the seller paid for all that work to be done. Okay. Or, about how much it would cost to get all that done on average in today's market with contractors and things like that. And then just take a third of that cost and add it into the CMA for pretty much every other property to get it to that same level. Okay. Is that a hard and fast rule? No. It could be, a little bit less than a third depending on the quality of work. It could be a little bit more depending on the quality, things like that. It's another reason why pricing homes is both a science and an art. Yes. If I'm looking and there's absolutely no homes in the same neighborhood, but outside of the neighborhood within that mile radius that an appraiser uses, and the other homes outside of the neighborhood are a little bit better, a little bit closer to the same quality of interior and exterior finishes as the subject property is, most of the time I'll pull those properties in just as like a baseline, but then kind of put a note in there that says this is not the same neighborhood, it's still not an HOA, or it still is an HOA depending on the subject property, obviously. Still in the same school district, things like that. It's still very, very similar, just not the exact same area. So kind of for them to keep that in mind too.
I like that a lot. Well, that's all I have. I just want to thank you again for coming on. It's a lot of great information. I think the realtors are going to get a good amount of learning out of this, especially people that are maybe newer to the company. But that's always the aim for these videos, to have people learn something. But definitely. I will put Duncan's social media and his website on screen and down below for you guys to go check out if you wish to. But other than that, thank you again for watching this week's Workout Wednesday, and we will see you next week. Take care.